Hey everybody, welcome back to Turn Bark Time. I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
I think he meant to say I am Bark. And we are still here for a long time. I hope everyone's doing well. We're going to dive right into a topic. We are on season 3. I keep laughing at you, Bark. You just look so cool. Episode 156 makes it 6, not 156. Sorry, 1 5 plus 1 makes 16. So let's go with that. Barker, that outfit says it all. Go ahead.
We're going to talk about Viking explorers in North America. So,
So
huge shout out to I guess she's almost a sister-in-law, but not quite yet. This was a Christmas present. I think one of her sisters knitted it. So it's sorry. I have shaved and got my hair cut recently. So
yeah,
just had to vibe that out.
it looked great.
A common misconception about Vikings is that Vikings wore helmets with horns on them when there is actually no historical evidence
Nope.
or benefit to putting horns on one's helmet.
Nope.
So.
It's a story. This topic comes from actually really funny. I've been watching this, and again, we're not sponsored by anybody, so don't worry about it. But if you haven't seen the show on CBS, it's called Ghosts, and it's based on a UK show that I just saw, also called Ghosts, and it is a show that takes place in like middle upstate New York. And this couple inherits a haunted house, and the ghosts are all just really goofy. But like one of the ghosts that died on the property, he's the oldest ghost. His name is Thorfinn. Ironically, that's named after an actual Viking. And and he is a Viking that's in uh, New York. That's where he dies. He's actually struck by lightning on his metal helmet. And like one of the lines from the show is like, he's like, I was struck by lightning. In retrospect, metal helmet maybe not the best idea. So what I texted Barker, I was like, dude, have we done Vikings? He's like, no. I was like, Vikings in North America? Like, heck yes. So that is what we were talking about today. We're going to talk about all about the exploration because obviously one of the things we learned when we first got to school was Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. He's credited with European discovery of the Americas, but about what is it now 1,001 years ago, there was a permanent settlement, semi-permanent, I should say, semi-permanent settlement of Vikings in Newfoundland, on the eastern side of Canada. So yes. I'm going to do my best to pronounce it. If you are one of my many friends that are from Montreal, Quebec, you're about to butcher my French, I believe it's La Meadows, Lasnus. I'm not. Yeah, Google. I tried Google translating it. Worked on it.
I looked it up because I thought it was weird because we're talking about Vikings. It's a French name, but that's because French Canada, which your friends in Quebec are very, very familiar with, the other part of Canada, or maybe the true part of Canada from their perspective. Anyways,
let's go with the true part.
Canadians can debate.
Yes.
It's actually, I tend to use a different word for this, but they said a corruption of the French name Lance aux Meduses, which is the cove of the jellyfish cove.
Oh, okay.
So apparently it's a little bit of the Brits not being able to speak the French. No parlez-vous. So it went from being medu, meaning jellyfish, to meaning meadow.
Yeah.
So the cove of the meadow doesn't make much sense, but the jellyfish cove makes a little bit more.
Yeah.
So so like we always, like you were saying, we always kind of credit Columbus, who's now kind of infamous, right? Used to be famous, now he's infamous for the establishment of the exchange of people's plants and diseases between the Americas and Afro-Eurasia. But we now know that almost, 1492, math, 470-ish.
Yep, that sounds right.
Hashtag history teachers, not math teachers. But in the year 1021 is the best guess they have, and they're saying that they're probably there earlier because you don't normally build a semi-permanent settlement the first time you show up.
Yeah.
There was a Viking, I guess, kind of like village or depot built on its, if I remember the map right, it's on the an island on the northern part of Newfoundland.
Yep.
Which for most of our American viewers, you're going to have to jump on Google Maps and take a peek at that because we suck at geography, especially when it's not American.
Yep. We suck at it when it is American, though, too.
That's why you should play Worldle.
Yep.
So
hashtag World.
Not a paid promotion. But it was one of those things that was interesting, and like I was thinking about, like, Vikings are very much like in the public realm. You had Vikings on History Channel. We like the show The Last Kingdom.
Yeah.
Which deals with, again, Vikings. There was the movie The Northman that just came out, which is about Northmen, which is another, I guess, kind of like name for Vikings. But again, essentially, these people came from Scandinavia, which, if you're not aware what Scandinavia is, that's the gotcha at the top of Europe.
Yeah.
That would be Finland, Sweden, and Norway. Right. I always think of them as the Scandinavian fingers, and Denmark. Denmark is part of that.
I was going to say, don't forget Denmark.
A little bimble down there. Yeah. That's where, pretty sure that's where Beowulf was from. Anyways, he talked about the Danes, the Spear Danes, and, going to Geatland and all that fun stuff. But that's a topic for another day. But,
sorry, really interrupt real quick. What's really funny is that, like, throughout the entire series of Ghosts, when they talk about trying to get rid of people or doing something, right? Thorfinn, the Viking guy, is like, I send head of Dane to mother. She opened presents. Big surprise. So apparently he was not counting the Danes in the Vikings, but that's just a whole other story.
And so one of the things that I guess people know about the Vikings is that they had boats, and they like to sail boats, and they go to new places. Yeah. And so eventually, like, they go from Scandinavia, they're kind of down the coast, and they end up in England, and then from there they go to Ireland, and then from there they keep moving. Let's see, west. Yes, west. Yes,
west.
Maps.
Yes. Northwest.
Geography. And they end up in Iceland, and then eventually they settle in Greenland. And so whenever I think about the name Greenland, it always goes back to Mighty Ducks, I think 2.
Yep.
Where the bad guy in the film is the Icelandic hockey team.
Yep.
And Emilio Estevez is talking to their assistant coach, who's a very attractive Scandinavian lady. And they talk about how it was a trick because they wanted people to go to Greenland because, it's named Greenland when actually Iceland is green, and, Greenland's covered in ice, and Iceland's very nice.
Yeah.
But another theory that I've found is that Eric the Red was trying to motivate people to come settle on Greenland. And not seen pictures of Greenland. It is not.
It's ice.
It's ice. It's rocks. There's no trees.
Yeah.
It sucks.
I met one person in an airport one time that works for the United States military on a project in Greenland, and they lived underground.
Just like in that movie Greenland that came out not too long ago. No spoilers, but
yeah.
It's very important to the plot to be underground.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not a movie plot. Anyway, build your tinfoil hat, go write a thesis. But eventually, Eric the Red has a baby, not by himself, but anyway, fathers a child named Leif. A lot of people in America who aren't
Scandinavian
don't do a great job of pronouncing names from other languages. Like kids whose names are Jorge getting called George instead of Jorge.
Yep.
And so a lot of people say Leif Erikson, but it's either Leif or like Life.
Yeah.
Erikson, which his last name is literally Erickson because his dad's name was
Eric the Red. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, this is before surnames were really that important, and then very much Islamic names are very similar, like Ibn, or like, bin, whatever, like bin Salama or Ibn Khaldun. Anyway, they work the same way. But anyway, they start expanding, and I'm trying to remember. There was a guy who was trying to get to Greenland, and then there was a storm. Huh?
I think that is the Thorfinn.
Yeah, gets caught in a storm and ends up in a different place and comes back. It's like, hey, I found a place that doesn't suck so much.
Yeah.
And people were like, are you sure? And so like it's been debated. And so a lot of what our historical record comes from two different sagas that were written, I guess, by the Viking cultures, which I think we would say are mostly based out of Iceland.
Yeah.
Which is the saga of the Greenlanders and the saga of Eric the Red. And so they both kind of talk about this idea that you eventually get to this place called, there was kind of three different steps. There was Helluland, which we think is, I think is it Baffin Island?
Yeah, Baffin Island, I think that's how you say it.
Which Helluland translates from old like Norse to land of flat rocks. So not attractive, sucks.
Yeah.
And then below that, which they think is the Labrador Peninsula, was Markland, which stands for forest land. And then, of course, the further south they went, they found a place they called Vinland.
Yep.
Because it was covered in what they thought were natural grapes, which is debated of whether they were actually grapes or something else. But it was a fruit that grew on a vine.
Blackberries.
Yeah. And so this would always been kind of like something that people had talked about. There's been some kind of like, I guess, kind of like pseudo history where people were trying to find, there were some carvings here and that. And it really took until 1960. There was an explorer / archaeologist,
yes.
I can see words.
Yep.
Couple. And the wife was the archaeologist, and her name was Anne Stein Ingstad. And again, my Norwegian is no bueno.
Yeah, un pequeño.
Yeah. And her husband, who I believe is pronounced Helge.
Yeah,
Helge. So he was more of like he was in charge of like the traveling, and she was in charge of like excavating. And so in 1960, between 1960 and 1968, on the northern island off of Newfoundland, they found evidence of kind of these Viking, in a way, like almost, well, they're not the only people to do it, but like people who live in cold environments and you don't have a ton of trees, you can't exactly you don't just build a house.
Yeah.
Like we think about a house. What you do is you build a structure, and then it's kind of like a hobbit hole. Like you put dirt over the top of it, and it helps insulate and keep heat in and keep it cool in the summertime. And so like kind of these, I guess, Viking huts, but they're really like more subterranean than they are like a fully freestanding structure.
You call them like, I'd almost call them like earth houses, really. Yeah. It wasn't a full dig out like you still dug out the hillside, but you fortified it with wood to keep it from collapsing in on itself.
Yeah, and so they found evidence, and then through carbon dating, that's how they were able to kind of verify that it happened at that time. They found actual like cut timber, and then through magic, that is science, when there's a solar flare.
Yeah, that's what I was reading.
Yeah, it leads to an anomaly in the tree rings, I think it is.
Yep.
And so like they looked at that, and then they counted the number of tree rings from the anomaly forward, and they knew that there was an anomaly at like the year like 990 something, and then they counted like so many years after that, and they're like, that's how they came up with the year 1021.
Yep.
And there's other kind of like spot evidence here and there of other Viking artifacts and like tales. The problem is that nobody wrote a history book. They wrote these sagas, and it wasn't right. The sagas weren't necessarily like they weren't writing history to write history. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a mix of like almost like oral tradition, and like somebody wrote down oral tradition.
Yeah.
And when you tell stories become grander over time.
Absolutely. Talk to anybody who fishes.
Yeah. Well, George Washington, the cherry tree.
Yeah.
And so like there's accounts that, and there's evidence of like trees from Canada being grown in other Viking settlements, like not in Canada. So there
Yeah.
was obviously more interaction between these settlements or potentially other settlements that were more temporary. And it was also said that there was the Vikings were not able to establish, let's say, diplomatic relations with the Native Americans
Yeah.
or the First Nations. I guess it's in Canada. The first
First
people,
Nations, which
First Nations people.
I like that for everybody. I think that's a great name for, but that's just my personal opinion. Side note.
Um, and they called the Vikings essentially. They had a name for the natives, and it was not something they called them like. Oh, what was it? I'm trying to think what it was. It's something. It's not like it's a name that just does not. It sounds like it's like. Oh, geez, I'm so mad at myself. I can't remember. But like the name they had was not. It was just. It was like called them like it was almost like an annoyance or like they were like they're super aggressive. They come and they fight. And so like there's this great like people ask, well, why did the Vikings like stop? Like like why didn't they colonize North America?
Yeah.
And there's all these like again nobody wrote it down, and so we have to look at the evidence and kind of make conjectures. And some of the conjectures is well maybe the native like the First Nations people were putting up too much of a resistance because there were larger, I mean you're sending over like 30 Vikings at a time,
Yeah.
and if you have, we know that there were First Nations civilizations that had way more numbers than that. And so like if invaders showed up and the Vikings were aggressive in the beginning, that was kind of their MO, was
Yeah.
to be aggressive when they came to new
Great.
places.
Yeah.
And so like they were kind of met like steel, or I guess well, steel with bone. But when you have more people who know the terrain, it puts you at a disadvantage. And I think this is kind of what fueled the terrible it's not a not well, a lot of people don't think it's a very good movie. I don't think I've seen it all the way through, and it's terrible history. But Pathfinder, this idea of like a half Viking, half
Yeah.
First Nations man, you know, and help like living in the, you know, Eastern Canada and like helping people solve problems. Like it's just
Uh,
kind of this
I'm gonna
myth.
take a shot at this name just for the fact I found it. I think it's like I'm gonna call it Skaralingi and or Skaraling in Danish
Like
means like
yeah,
weakling.
yeah, Scarlings or something like that. Yeah,
Scarling.
yeah, and it reminds me of like the Scourge or like you know what I mean. Like it does,
Mhm. Yeah.
just doesn't sound like a
Not
very
saying very nice.
positive name. And
Right.
the interactions between the two were not like they were not able to establish a good rapport
Right.
by hardly any account. Like there's nobody who was like, oh yes, we had great times and we traded.
We traded and we drank mead.
Did not happen.
um,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, no, talking about the purposes of these villages too, right? So one of the purposes that archaeologists kind of look at, and they look at the way, like, because there's remnants of iron tools, there's remnants of different things that were left behind. I'm gonna say, I mean, iron tools, bones, and like obviously the pieces of shelter that are identifiable. A lot of people think that or are surmising that this is a ship repair area, right? Ship's damaged by some sort of storm, reef, whatever. And so you need to come ashore. There's timber, there's everything like that. You're coming up, you're setting up your settlement. But to repair a ship is going to take time. Therefore, the first thing you're going to do before you even repair the ship is you're going to start building some sort of settlement to be safe, and then, or some sort of structure to keep you out of the elements, and then build, and then go into repairing the ship.
And I think they also said that there was some evidence to support the idea that potentially maybe they used it as the base of operations to conduct further
Exploration.
explorations inland and then bring stuff back, kind
Mm-hmm.
of gather your resources and then ship stuff back to Greenland
Yeah.
or Iceland via Greenland
Yeah.
to bring products back that were not available, like timber.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely.
we think about us as a modern thing, like living in Longview. We're still cutting down trees, and they're still down here on the port of Longview getting. Some of them are turned into paper, and some of them are shipped off as timber or
Yeah.
lumber. So
Absolutely. So, just kind of a cool topic to talk about though, like because when we talk about all these other elements, we look at them and we're like, man, like I mean, again, I take can I still recited the rhyme for you that Columbus is like the guy who comes over and everything like that, and obviously his part of history is being his role in history has now changed as we view things in our own time and everything like that and make those own judgments. Um, but now we look at, and as we discover more things like we saw with like the carbon dating, solar flares, things like that, we can identify and be like, oh yeah, so this happened, and all of a sudden we have this other group of people that we don't talk about, basically because not from Western Europe. And so getting the credit they deserve and everything like that, like again, Leif Erikson and Eric the Red, and then going from there, and you got Thorfinn, and I'm gonna say his last name wrong. I'm gonna call it Carl Stephanie, something like that. So, but Barger, I was looking, there is a few little tiny pieces of evidence of Inuit peoples from the First Nations having some sort of interaction where they make a comment about it. I think the comment from there says, soon the kayaker sent out his spear in good earnest and killed him on the spot. When winter came, it was the general belief that I'm going to call it Kavaldlayet would come and avenge the death of their countrymen. And that word is Inuit for foreigner European. And so it's similar to the modern Greenlandic word for Dane. And so there is some little piece of evidence that this could be, those interactions with Inuit people. But obviously, we're talking about throwing a spear through a dude, so it's not exactly like, hey, we hugged it out. So
Yeah.
but
And it's interesting because like a lot of a Viking is a fairly common, I guess, high school mascot.
yeah,
Think about the Minnesota Vikings, and then here in the Pacific Northwest, you have Portland State, Western Washington, I think are both the Vikings.
yep.
And it's like that doesn't mean there's no historical evidence that Vikings actually made it to the Pacific Northwest.
Not a little too far.
But it's the idea that people of Scandinavian ancestry
Made it over here.
have migrated this way because, like, if you didn't know, Nacelle, which is a very small town between Longview and the coast, is home to a Fin Fest every other
Oh
summer that
yeah,
I think
FinFest.
they now co-host with Astoria because it's growing.
Yeah,
Um, but anyway, there's a lot of people down there. We have some Finnish ancestry. Emma's been very interested in kind of learning where we come from.
nice.
And so we've been talking about we're European, we're Scandinavian. On my mom's side, they can just say like they know like what town we left in Finland
Yeah,
and talk about how our last name was Sarvasalo when they got on the boat, and then we got to America, got through the immigration process, and then it was Wilson because it was
son of
more
Will,
American than Sarvasalo.
son of Will. So
Perhaps a tale for another time.
yeah, maybe. Well, folks, Bark, anything more?
No, I think that's it.
Actually, no, we have one more thing. So I'll do mine and then you do yours. Hey, shout out to all the Quincy High School seniors graduating class of 2022. Fantastic. Congratulations on all your accomplishments. Wherever you choose to go in life, we're looking forward to it. Reach out to Barker and I. We're so happy for you guys. And just enjoy this time of your life. Be safe. Don't do anything stupid, right? And then Bark, I know you got a shout out for them Jacks over there.
Yeah, the class of 2022. So these are guys that I guess I've only coached for 2 years, but it feels like it's been a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
20 a class of 20 football players, as well as a handful of kids that I taught my first year through remote. We had the scholarship assembly last week, and I think the senior class has earned like $3.8 million in scholarships.
Isn't that cool?
I mean, it's mind blowing what kids are doing and where they're going, and you know we've got kids. There's a guy who's one of the senior presentations I listened to. He has been committed to the Marine Corps since June, like the end of his junior year. He's been doing all of the pre-induction stuff that he can do while he's been a senior during his senior year. All the PT, like he's already like in like kind of a semi-leadership role as much as he can be. So like doesn't have to be college. There's other
Right.
pathways. Kids are, they're taking apprenticeships with the trades. They are joining the military. They're some of them are just straight up going to work in a family business.
Yeah.
And then you got kids that are, we've got LCC here in town. They're pursuing their career at LCC, which now offers some 4-year degrees. You don't even have to leave home to get a 4-year degree. It's pretty
Right.
amazing. Um, and then other kids are, I mean, it's kind of, you got kids that are like staying local. They're going to Evergreen, they're going to Wazoo, they're going to Eastern and Central, UW. And then there's one of our seniors, great girl, is going to Georgia State.
Oh wow. Go
Like she
Cougars. Bobcats.
Panthers.
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 Man.
That was important to her, and that's where she wants to go. And so just everybody, as you start your next chapter, again, I'm going to echo the thing: be safe. Don't do anything that you'll regret the next day.
Yeah.
So make good decisions. Enjoy your time with each other. Some of you are going to become adults. Some of you are going to college, and like you're going to be adults here soon, anyways. And you'll realize truly how special school was, and how, I mean, it's not even, I'm not even going to say the word being a child. It's like being a student.
Yeah.
Like you're going to miss what being a student means. I had the pleasure of listening to two of our foreign exchange students do their senior presentations, and they talked about the difference between French high school and American high school. And one of the reasons that we get out competed by these other countries, and like, again, this is strictly opinion. I'm not there's no evidence. This is my own thought.
It's a
So
Barkerism.
yeah, it's a Barkerism thought. So take it with a block of salt. The thing that they both echoed about the difference in high school is that in France, it's about going to school is about school. Like just it's about academics. There's not community building. There's not sports. There's not dances. There's not, you know what I mean? Like it's about you go in there and your job is to learn stuff and take a test and pass a test. Where in the United States, high school is a community thing where there is sports, there's school spirit. We have spirit weeks. And one of them was super excited. She goes, she's like, it's every French girl's dream to go to an American prom, because it's not a thing that they do in high school over there. You know what I mean? And so it's just like one of the quintessential like Americanisms
Yeah.
that like as a foreign exchange student, it's like it was like the cherry on top that like she was looking forward to, was the idea of like going to an American prom.
Perfect.
Um,
Good. Well, I'm glad.
yeah, it was kind of it's cool. I mean, I'm upstairs by a couple of the avid moms. I'm kind of like an avid like uncle, where like I know what the avid vibes are like, and those kids just coming out of there. What was that? That was today. Or was it yesterday? It's today, and just like not wanting to leave.
Yep.
So the best of luck to you guys on your journey, whatever that next step is. Be smart, be safe. If you can't be there, that be nice.
Yeah. In a world where you can be anything, be kind.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. Have a good night, everybody,
Be safe.
and be well.